Hi, everybody. We're going to be getting started here for the live 2016-2017 US Regents Review. If you've never been here before, pretty open forum. You just kind of include your questions either on the group chat or on a Google chat. Or on the YouTube stuff, you can put that right in there. All right, so we're going to be getting started. Of course, there's a little bit of lag time. I don't have the world's fastest internet here in my house in upstate New York, but we'll do what we can, right? So for those of you who are just joining us, we will be studying for the 2017 US Regents Review. It is Monday night and the exam is tomorrow morning. So we're all taking our last few minutes to get our study in and get ready for the big exam. So I figured we'll just kind of start a little bit about what the exam consists of and kind of how you go about doing it and the time you have. The exam consists of 50 multiple choice questions. It consists of one thematic essay, one DBQ essay, and anywhere from about 10 to 15 short answer questions. Those short answer questions go right along with the DBQ question that you will also have to do. I am checking some lag time. I've got YouTube open on my other channel so that I can see if we've got any comments, but I am nervous that it's too laggy, but we'll find out. Again, if you're just joining us, feel free to join a group chat on Google Hangouts, or you can ask questions on YouTube down below. I am doing this all by my lonesome, so I will get back to you as fast as I can with comments and such. So anyway, we were just getting back to the format of the exam. Again, 50 multiple choice, one thematic, one DBQ, about 10 to 15, could be more, could be less, short answer questions. It's imperative you do all parts of the examination. Don't miss anything. It's a huge difference if you don't do something. Teachers cannot, under any circumstance, give you credit if you didn't do a darn thing. So let's get right into the material. I know you're all dying to do that. So let's look at what would be the first couple questions you'd be asked. Well, it's pretty simple. The first couple questions are probably going to be a geography question, something to do with the layout of America, just the geography of the country. So a couple key things you want to be aware of. You want to think about New England as a shipping area with jagged coastlines, cool climates, rocky soil, not conducive to growing. As opposed to the South, you want to think about them as having warm climates, and they end up growing plantations. Some key features to the United States you want to think of are the Mississippi River that separates kind of the East Coast from the West Coast as a major trading route. So you could get stuff from the Midwest down to the Gulf of Mexico. You want to think about things like the Rocky Mountains, and you want to think about them because they stop kind of Western expansion for a while. And they also, if you get to a transcontinental railroad type question, it also slows things down with the transcontinental railroad. It takes a lot more time to get to that sort of location because of that. All right, I'm just taking a check here, seeing if I got any questions, because it's always way more fun if I get questions from you guys. You guys are the ones taking the exam, not me. But not yet. Okay, so we want to talk about colonial period. So that's the time kind of when the Pilgrims come over till the American Revolution. So you're looking at 1600s to 1700s. Things you want to know in that, you want to know about the triangle trade, which has to do with the trading of slaves, rum in the Caribbean, and kind of finished products and raw materials, either to or from the United States or Great Britain. That's the triangle trade. Key things, again, slaves, rum, or other sugars from the Caribbean, so down south, and finished material coming out of New England, particularly, and the slaves coming into New England. You want to talk maybe know a little something about the French and Indian War. The French and Indian War is part of a larger war that was being fought in Europe called the 7 Years' War. Confusing name because it took like 6 years, 7 years, 9 years. I don't know. It was definitely not 7 years. It lasted way longer than that or less than that, something. But the French and Indian War was, contrary to the way the name is, it was the English and the Indians versus the French and Indians. And what you had is you had different tribes of Native Americans fighting against different tribes of Native Americans and Europeans. And what this really did was it decided which one of those world superpowers, either France or England, was going to take control of North America. And in case you didn't notice, I'm speaking English. So you can probably guess who won, right? The English won. So the English win, and that means that they control the colonies until they declare their independence. Hey, speaking of independence, let's talk a little bit about it, right? The Declaration of Independence. It is the Dear John breakup letter of century, more than century, centuries. So basically what happened with the Declaration of Independence was the colonists were really getting frustrated with being part of England, and they said, we don't like you anymore, and we're going to break up with you, England. And it was said just like that. No, it wasn't entirely said like that, but it was pretty darn close to it. The colonists wrote the Declaration of Independence. You may have heard it before. You should have heard it before. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. That's the Declaration of Independence. And they go on to talk about all the things that the king does wrong. Right down, they say he did this, he does that, he did this, to say all the reasons why the United States needs to get away from England. And that's the Declaration of Independence, signed, of course, July 4th, 1776, our Independence Day. What a coincidence. And let's see, what else do I want to talk about? I got my notes over here, so I'm until you guys start asking questions is what I prefer. I will just be checking some things off. So after our declaration, when I said before, let me go back a second, hope you don't mind. When I talked before about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, we got that idea, or Thomas Jefferson got that idea, from a man named Thomas Paine. Hope my students out there are saying it right now. They're saying common sense. It's only common sense that we should break away from England. So he writes the book called Common Sense that talks about how we should break away from England. Okay. We want to get into the Articles of Confederation. The Articles of Confederation are the forerunners to the wonderful, fabulous American Constitution. And while you were taking your American history class, you probably focused on a couple key things, and that was particularly the weaknesses in the Articles of Confederation. They didn't work, obviously, or we'd use them, but they didn't. So why didn't they work? Well, what they did was the colonists, the new Americans, right, they were really concerned that the American people could end up being like England had been, and that they could have kind of a king or queen with absolute power. So they were really, many of them were very nervous about creating a strong federal or central government. Those people who were scared of that power were called anti-federalists. They were scared of a strong national government. However, on the other side, there were Federalists, and the Federalists believed that we should have a strong national government and that it would be the only way for us to conclude a formalized government. So the truth lies somewhere in the middle. They create the Articles of Confederation, and it didn't give the national government quite enough power. So it failed. Things like, a couple key things. It doesn't give the United States government the power to wage war. Someone invades, who's going to say if we're going to go to war or not? There's no way to make money under the Articles of Confederation, and we're not even sure who's the president under the Articles of Confederation. It's very unsure who's kind of running the show. Along that, we don't know what's going on with interstate trade. So I can live in New York, as we study for the New York State Regents, And I could go down to Virginia and there's, I'm in a foreign colony, so there's not a lot of work between the states. All the newly formed former colonies now become states. So that's what the Articles of Confederation is. It doesn't work. You need to know that. It doesn't work. It's weak. So what do they need to do? They need to get together on a really hot day in Philadelphia. And if you guys thought it was hot in school today, I got news for you. It was in like July in Philadelphia, and there wasn't even the thought of the invention of the air conditioner. It was hot. There were flies. It was a mess. Everyone was cranky. So they get together in Philadelphia to create this new government officially. They make the Constitution of the United States. And they make it, and it's brilliant. It's not perfect, but it is kind of the best thing that anyone had out there. I am just checking to see if I've got any questions coming on. Like I said, if you are watching this, please ask your questions on Google Hangout if you have that. If not, post some questions down below on the YouTubes, and I will try to get to them if I can. Shout out, by the way, to anyone there from ADKP Tech. I hope you guys are studying. Well, obviously you're studying. You're watching this right now. But I hope you're studying other things. All right, let's move on to, we talked about the Articles of Confederation. We started with the Constitution. So let's talk a little bit more about the Constitution. It is the foundation of our government. It has several, I don't even remember the number, but it has several articles to it. But we're going to focus on 3 of those articles because those 3 of those articles define the way our government is formed. Okay? And you might have had in like your class like sort of a pyramid thing where it talked about checks and balances. So our 3 branches of government that we're going to look at right now is we're going to look at our executive branch, we're going to look at our judicial branch, and we're going to look at the legislative branch. And so what our founding fathers thought of was if we have 3 branches of government, no one branch can get too powerful. It's a good idea. So the idea is that the President of the United States has certain rules and things that they can and can't do. So one of them, I'm going to get some checks and balances here. One of them is that the President can veto a law that comes from Congress. How great is that? The President can think this is a really bad law. I don't want it. He vetoes it. Well, what if Congress thinks it's a really good law? Like a really, really good law. They think it's really important. Well, they have the power to override that veto. But it takes a lot of people in Congress to override that veto. But that's a check and balance. Another check and balance is judicial review. Mulberry versus Madison. I hope my students scream that out. So judicial review means that the courts, they looked at the law, the Congress passed it and the President passed it, but the Supreme Court looked at it and said, this is not a law. This is unconstitutional. They have the power to look at that again, to have judicial review, to look at it again, to look and analyze that law. And Mulberry versus Madison, judicial review, it's going to be there. Better know it. I'll get more into that in just a minute. The other thing I want you to talk about or know about the creation of our Constitution is when they came up with our second power, the legislative branch, they didn't know how to give that power out. So they decided, because you should have studied, I'm sure you did, the Virginia plan, which was the large states all over the country. And they wanted representation based on population because they were large. They had lots of people living in them. It was a brilliant idea. More population, more people that are going to support them. However, other smaller states like New Jersey, who didn't have as many people, came up with a plan called the New Jersey Plan. I didn't just pick that one on accident. The New Jersey Plan talked about how every state should get the same amount of votes in Congress. So they said we should all get 2 votes, so it's all equal. Well, again, the truth lies somewhere in the middle. And they came up with what is referred to as either the Connecticut Compromise or the Great Compromise. They're one and the same thing. The Connecticut Compromise or Great Compromise takes the 2 of those things and combines them together. And they say what we'll do is we'll have 2 houses of Congress, or a bicameral Congress. Fancy word to say two houses. And one will be the House of Representatives based on population of the state. So large states will get more people. And the second house, which is the Senate, will get 2 votes per state, no matter what the size of your state is. How smart is that? And if you look at a map, you can look right now if you want. You can search this up, and you'll see states like California get something like 53 House of Representative seats, where a state like Montana, they get like 1. Okay, but yet at the end in the Senate, every single state gets 2 votes. So that's a bicameral legislation that they came up with during the Great Compromise at the Constitutional Convention. Super important to know that one. Along the same lines there, not quite as big because it's no longer used, but knowing that at the time, slaves and actually I guess all African Americans counted as 3/5 of a person. Not saying it's right, just saying that's what it is. So they counted slaves and Native and African Americans as 3/5 of a person. So the southern states didn't want to count African Americans as people because you can't enslave people, that's wrong. So they couldn't consider them people. And that's how they got around that. They weren't a person. They were 3/5 of a person, but they wanted them to count because it would increase their population. And again, it would give them that lead in the House of Representatives. So it was very important for that aspect. I'm going to do a quick check here to see if I got any questions coming. Oh, I do. Oh, I missed that whole live chat. Hi, friends. There you are. Wow. I missed that whole thing. Look how good you guys are all studying tonight. Okay. All right, so now I'm looking at the right spot to answer questions. We're on 2 Google Hangouts. Okay, I'm back. Hello! I don't like using your names, but I saw you, so I know that your name's up there, but I still feel bad. Okay, so now that I actually see what's going on, you guys can start asking me real questions, too. That would be great. I'm going to move on, though. Let me see. We got into all of our checks and balances. We talked a little bit about the Electoral College. You probably, no matter where you were in the state of New York, paid attention to the election at some point, because in this most recent election, you may have noticed, the President of the United States won the Electoral College, but they didn't win the popular vote. I got some gnats. So what that means is that each state is a winner-take-all. There's a few that aren't. And when you vote, you're actually voting for an elector. And that elector casts your ballot for you, and all the votes in that state go to that one person. So, for example, I think the state of New York is 27 electors. I don't judge me completely on that. But in the most recent election, most of the people voted for Hillary Clinton from the state of New York. So everybody in the state of New York voted for Hillary Clinton. Okay? And that's the Electoral College. So Hillary Clinton got all 27 of New York votes. And we've had, not to try to get political, we've had plenty of presidents elected under an Electoral College system, but not the popular vote. You could certainly question a lot there, but that's not for me to discuss today. All right, so I want to get into George Washington for a few minutes. Okay, we got a question about judicial review. Okay, so basically every Supreme Court case has to do with judicial review. So what that means is it's a review of what the government has put into place. So this starts with Mulvey versus Madison, which has to do with the midnight judges and John Adams deciding Supreme Court justices right before he leaves office. That part of the case is unimportant. What is important is that when the Supreme Court saw what was going on, they said, hey, that's not right. We want to look at this, and they can decide the new law. If the Supreme Court never had established judicial review, in reality, we could never, the court system could never oversee anything the president or Senate puts into place. So there's every single court case you ever have studied probably studied a whole bunch. I know my students, we studied a whole bunch in the last couple weeks. Every single one of those got to the Supreme Court because of judicial review. It's the review of everything that went on in the government. So let's think of a couple of Supreme Court cases. How about Tinker versus Des Moines? Okay, so that was the case of a high school student, brother and sister, who were protesting the Vietnam War. They wore black armbands on their arms. It's a good place to wear armbands. And they were protesting the Vietnam War, and they got in trouble for it. They got suspended from school, and they brought this up, and they said, and the school said, but this is a law, that they're not allowed to do this in school. And that kind of kept going up and up. And basically the Supreme Court says, we're going to review this case. We're going to put it on trial. We're going to look at it. We're going to see if this law is just. And in Tinker versus Des Moines, they said, no, it wasn't just. Students do have the right to protest, even within school. There are certain boundaries, so don't do anything, particularly during a Regents exam, don't do anything stupid. I got a question. Again, I won't say who you are. But why were they protesting the war? The Vietnam War was very unpopular because a lot of people didn't see it as a war that we belonged in. When we have been doing in my class, we did a lot of stuff about foreign policy. And we had, for a long time, a policy of neutrality where we didn't get involved in a lot of wars and such. But after World War II, we came out as a major superpower. And one of those things that happens as a major superpower is we're kind of the big brother of the world. And in Vietnam, we, I guess going back to foreign policy, we had this big brother thing we had to do, but we also had containment, right? We did that in class. We did containment. And that meant we were trying to keep away communism. And what was going on was that North Vietnam was already communist, and the United States wanted to make sure that the rest of Korea didn't. Or there's another one. There's Korea War II, similar, exact same story. But we go to Vietnam. We want to keep containment back from Vietnam, and it's just not clear exactly why we're there, other than to stop communism from spreading on the other side of the globe. Lots of young men were being shipped overseas and dying. And the other reason back to the big brother thing, we were there helping out France because it was a French colony. Vietnam was a French colony. But ultimately it was to keep back, to contain communism. But a lot of people were just really unhappy because of how many people were dying. It just was an unjust war, maybe no different than you may feel about current ongoing military battles that we're involved in, such as ISIS or something like that. Because I still feel bad, Malcolm. Fine, I said your name. So that's that. Okay, well, I also had students I couldn't say their name before. Okay. Let me see. What else do we want to talk about? Oh, Malcolm, what would have happened if we hadn't gone to war? Well, we lost the war in Vietnam. So the same thing. If we didn't go to war, Vietnam would be communist. If we went to war, Vietnam was communist. So I don't know. I could get into that more with you at another time. I just don't want to do it now. Maybe it'll be an essay. You can write all about it. That'll be fun. Okay. Oh, Katie, you're so good. No, it's not. It's a military police action. We haven't declared war since World War II. You're right. We do call it the Vietnam War. We also call the war in Korea the Korean War. But you are correct. There are no wars since World War II. The United States has not gotten. And why? Checks and balances. So wonderful. Checks and balances. The Congress has never declared war. So we've never been in war. Just lots of people dying, I don't know, for fun, apparently. All right, Alexander Hamilton. You can sing a song about it. All right, I'm going to move on. Everyone else is too. Okay, so Alexander Hamilton, big thing. There's a reason why he's on money. If you've seen the play, you probably know a ton about Alexander Hamilton or listen to the music. Big thing, though, he proposes the national bank, thinks that the United States should all have one banking system. Brilliant idea. But it is vetoed. Yes, it's vetoed. It doesn't happen for a while. It does. We do get it eventually. But it is vetoed by Andrew Jackson. I would say my favorite, but he's not. I don't like to get political, but I don't like Andrew Jackson. And neither should you. All right. I'm looking back to where I want to be. So Andrew Jackson vetoes the national bank. He also, why I don't like him. He also sends the Native Americans that were living in Georgia and northern Florida, makes them walk the Trail of Tears, a gazillion of them. That's an exact figure. Just kidding. Of them die along the way. And just all around bad guy. Also with Andrew Jackson, you want to talk about the spoil system. That was when he was given jobs to all of his cronies. So all of his buddies got to get great government jobs and were kind of paid off and got to do things for him. So Andrew Jackson, key things. Vetoes the national bank. Has the Cherokees march on the Trail of Tears. And whatever I just talked about. I've already forgotten. What did I just talk about? I don't know. All right. I'm losing my mind. All right, let's move on. Thomas Jefferson. All right. Thomas Jefferson, who actually, I don't know why I got all disoriented. Oh, spoil system is what I was saying. Got disoriented. I put him in a different order. Thomas Jefferson, really what you need to know about him is that he buys the Louisiana Purchase. So he doubles the size of the United States of America and sends Lewis and Clark out west to explore the newly purchased American land. I really like Jefferson. That's all you need to know for today. All right, moving on. I'm going to skip that. So my students, by the way, I'm using this. You all should have it. And that part that says 9 o'clock is wrong. You guys have to be there at 8. Okay, Western expansion. Okay. What is it called when America wants to go from East Coast to West Coast, all the way to the other side of the country? What is that called? Yes, I mean for tomorrow. So it's been on the wall, young lady. So Manifest Destiny is going from America from the East Coast to the West Coast. And that America has the right, and it's God's will that America should go from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast. That's Manifest Destiny. We're going to use that idea for a whole bunch of stuff. That means that gives us the right to wipe out Native Americans. It gives us the right to cut down all sorts of wilderness. And that's what that is. All right. So, Manifest Destiny. Okay. Along those lines, other thing you need to know about the American West is that we get a transcontinental railroad. Yay for railroads. Okay. Railroads are huge because they open us up from being able to transport. And allows us to go from East Coast, again, to fulfill our manifest destiny. So the Transcontinental Railroad goes from Southern California to Promontory Point, Utah, and the eastern side of that, the Atlantic I don't remember the name of it. That goes from Omaha, Nebraska to Promontory Point, Utah, and everything, they nail it in with a golden spike, and it's all fancy-pantsy. All right, that is Western expansion. Oh, and my students and I, we talked a little bit about the Homestead Act today. Homestead Act of 1862. And that is when the United States government said that they would give every American who moved out west, if they lived on the land for 5 years, they'd give everyone that property. So that meant you didn't have to buy it. Meant you just lived there for 5 years, you farm it, you had to farm it, and that is your land. The reason for this, again, it's manifest destiny. Yes, I will in 1 second. I will talk about foreign policies. So it is our destiny. We need to have to just expand that way. And if we have all these Americans, and by Americans I kind of mean white people, at this time, if we have all these white people living through from East Coast to West Coast, then we've, again, fulfilled that manifest destiny. So the Homestead Act kind of fulfills that also. I was just looking at my cat, but you guys can't see him. If he comes back, I'll show him to you. All right, so foreign policies. Let's talk a little about that. So we talked about we've done our dance, right? So let's go through the steps of our dance. Okay, so if you're in my class, then you got this. If you're watching this and you don't know what I'm talking about, then we'll do our best. Okay, so the first move to our dance is isolationism. So that's when you're dancing to yourself, okay? And you're not being bothered by anyone. This was 1776 to 1812. I don't know. That's about the time. So we do this dance. We're isolated. We don't care what's going on in the world. We don't care what's going on anywhere else. Like, we're just happy being the United States of America. Yay, look at us. Here we are. We're great. Okay. We don't just stick with that. The next thing we do as a major foreign policy is the Monroe Doctrine. And that comes to us from President James Monroe. He is the Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, 5th president of the United States. And he says, listen, Europe, don't you come over to the Americas, North or South America, and try to colonize it. You're not allowed. We're not going to let you. We're going to be isolated unless you come over to our land. If you come over to our land, we're going to kick your hiney. Okay? And in class, we call that the dog pee, right? Dog pee. So that's like a dog peeing in wherever they dogs pee. So we were saying, Europe, don't come over to the United States. Don't come over to North America. Don't come over to South America. Don't come over to Central America. If you do, we're going to kick your hiney. Okay? So that's the first move, but we just say it. Nothing happens for quite some time. So we go back to being isolated, but we want stuff. We discover we're kind of hungry. Okay, and that's imperialism. We're hungry. Rumbling our bellies. We're really hungry. We really want other stuff. So imperialism is when we start to get really interested in acquiring other lands. You can kind of think of Hawaii, Alaska, Cuba, which we'll get into a second, Puerto Rico, Guam. These are all things we're kind of like, we want them. We want them. And at the same time that we're wanting other stuff, and that's usually based on raw materials, that we look at other countries are also getting interested in. And that kicks off the Spanish-American War that takes place in Cuba. And that puts teeth into that dog that was peeing before. And what that means is in Cuba, Spain was coming over and they were going to colonize Cuba. And this is taking place 1895, late 1800s. So they come over and America's like, excuse me, we told you people, do not join into our world. You are not allowed to come into our world. You're not allowed to come into our hemisphere. And since you did, we're going to kick your hiney. And we do. We go down to Cuba. Teddy Roosevelt is there. He rides up San Juan Hill and he's got a hat on. It's very fancy. And we go in and we kick their butts. And we then at that point we take Cuba as a protectorate and we control Cuba up until the 1960s. We control Cuba. It never becomes a state, but we take it as something we call it a protectorate. We watch over Cuba for the next 100 years, and we only stop taking care of it because the communists come over and take over Cuba under Fidel Castro, which is a global II thing. So my students will get that next year. So that's that. Okay, so that's we just did imperialism. Okay, so that's a combination right there. And let's see. So up next we're gonna get. So that was the late 1800s. Now we're moving into the early 1900s. Wars going on in Europe. 1914. World War I's going on. The United States is like, no. We're isolation. We're neutral. You do your own thing, you weirdos over there in Europe. Yeah, until you start messing with us, okay? Because remember, the Germans sink the Lusitania, which was a ship filled with American citizens. Jasper, you want to say hi? Psst, psst. Filled with American citizens. Okay, well, I'll say hi to my cat. Hold on, I'll show you. There he is. Say hi. Oh, okay, we're studying for the exam. Okay, so the Germans sink the Lusitania, and then they also write the Zimmerman Note, which was the telegraph to the Germans that said, or to the Mexicans from the Germans, that that said that, you know, you guys, the Mexicans, should invade the United States. They didn't, but it was intercepted. The United States found out about it, but we got really mad at Germany. So we get into World War II. So we went from being neutral to going in a war. So we did the turtle, right? And then we started shooting. We went into war. So that then we go back to being neutral again after World War I. So we refused to join the League of Nations, which is sort of like the UN after World War I, because we say, oh, no, we're a neutral country. We are an isolation country. We don't want to get involved in European wars. We don't want to see any of this. So we're good for a while, but then a man you may have heard of, Adolf Hitler, comes to power. He's not the one that's important. The Emperor of Japan, I guess, is the one that's important, whose name is escaping me for right now. But he attacks Pearl Harbor. So we get involved in World War II because of the attack on Pearl Harbor. Hirohito. Emperor Hirohito, the last emperor of Japan. So Hirohito attacks the United States, Pearl Harbor. We get involved. As soon as we get involved with the war in the Pacific, we instantly join the war against Hitler in Europe. And so we're out. We're fighting again. And then after World War II, we kind of reach, I guess, our second to last foreign policy, which was the idea of containment. We're going to keep back communism. Through World War I, World War II, we were pretty cool with the communists. And what I mean is, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Uncle Joe Stalin was up there in Russia. He's the communist dictator. And I call him Uncle Joe because that's what President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's kids were calling him. Meanwhile, he's just as bad as Hitler. His numbers of people that he killed were really incredibly high, but we were friends with him because he hated Hitler and he hated Germany. So we were friends with him. So yay, cool. Then after the World War II, we decided, no, we're not cool with you. We're not cool with anybody that's in Russia. We've got this idea of containment. That idea of containment is going to get us into two wars. Or military police actions. You could actually argue that it gets us into more. But that idea of containment, keeping communism back, gets us into the Korean conflict, the Vietnamese conflict. It gets us into issues in Afghanistan. It gets us into some of the same sticky situations that we're in actually today is because of communism. But I will save that for a later day. Some of you will have to wait until government class. That'll be a long time. And that is, and then after that, and kind of where we are now, is we're this kind of friend of the world. We're this big protectorate of the country, of the world. Someone gets into a problem, we try to like hang out with them and try to make everything better. But we are, the United States of America is the strongest country in the world. Militarily, financially, we run everything. So we have kind of this big brother thing. If people are starving in Africa, it's kind of our duty to participate in that. If there's a genocide going on somewhere, it's our policy to kind of go and do the best we can to stop that. We haven't. That's a thing we'll do next year. Wow, I don't know, Katie. I will get to you. You mean tonight? Like for homework? I don't know. Yeah, and Malcolm, we just increased our military spending budget to it's the highest it's ever been. All right, so that's foreign policy in a nutshell. How did I get in this nutshell? Okay, moving along until someone gives me another question. is the United States Civil War. The Regents doesn't go crazy on the Civil War. So, a couple things you need to know. It's about states' rights. States' rights. So what that means is that slavery was at this point decided on by an individual state. I live in Virginia, I can have slaves. I live in New Hampshire, I don't have slaves. The federal government wanted to say, okay, we're the United States government, we're going to create a law that says no slaves, or we're going to make a law that says no one can eat ice cream on Tuesdays. It doesn't matter what in reality, what they claim, the reality of the idea of states' rights are. Between you and me and the rest of the world, we all know that the Civil War is about slavery, but you do need to really critically think on that. Slavery is the number one problem within state rights, but it is not the only single cause. The answer to that question is states' rights. Okay? And all right, let's see. States' rights. Abraham Lincoln could have said something along the lines, I don't have it written here, something along the lines of, if I could have gone through the Civil War without freeing a single slave, I would have. His only goal in the entire war was to keep the United States as one nation. A house divided amongst itself cannot stand. Abraham Lincoln, 1863. I don't know, I made up the date, but that's a real quote from him. All right, and let's see, moving on. Results of he does the Emancipation Proclamation, frees all the slaves. It doesn't free a single slave, because it only worked for the places that thought the United States was the United States. So the Confederate States wasn't part of the United States when he issued the Emancipation Proclamation. But the idea was that the President of the United States said, we will not have slavery anymore. Okay? That's the basic idea. The North wins, so we stay the United States of America. Okay, excellent. What we need to look at then, and what you're going to probably see more of, is the period known as bug time. As Reconstruction. Reconstruction is the time period from after the Civil War ends to, I don't know what the actual date is at the end. But what we see in there is we need to rebuild the South. The South is a hot mess after the Civil War. And buildings are gone, their population is decreased, and now they freed the slaves, which is great, fantastic. I'm happy, I'm thrilled. Now you have thousands of African Americans who, because of the bondage they suffered in slavery, have no education and have no jobs. They have no land. It's a mess. They were freed, but they had nothing. And this is that period of Reconstruction, that they have to figure all those problems out. So as far as the black slaves or the freed slaves came, one of the things they invented was the Freedmen's Bureau. Freedman's. And that was a department of the federal government that was in charge of trying to get those formerly enslaved persons a life. Okay? They tried to find them jobs. They tried to find them housing. They moved. This was a period of time, there was the Great Migration. A whole bunch of blacks in the South moved up north because guess what? Do you really want to stay where you've been enslaved for the last part of your whole life? No, of course not. So a lot of them moved up north, but they had no land. They didn't know anybody. So that's part of the Freedmen's Bureau. One of the things they were promised was 40 acres and a mule. Notice I said promise. They didn't all get it. But it's that same concept as the Homestead Act that we talked about before. But in this case, African Americans, former slaved in persons, would get 40 acres and a mule. And that would be their land after being enslaved. They get to have all of that stuff to help them out. Again, they didn't all get it, but the idea was at least there, trying to get them an education, trying to get them land, trying to get them a job. The American dream. So that's on the African American side. And a lot of Northerners went down south to help out African Americans. They were called carpetbaggers or scallywags. That's a fun word to say, scallywag. And they weren't greeted very well. This is also the time of the birth of the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, and who were out trying to kind of kill anybody who was going to be participating in helping African Americans or African Americans. This was a time of mass lynchings and hangings, yet not a good time to be in the South for anyone, really. I guess I can say that because we're all in New York. Hope you're not a transplant in the North and you were from the South, because I just said bad things about you. Okay. And then also, in that time of period, Reconstruction, we have the radical Republicans. Do not think of anything to do with today's political parties. These are the very different political parties. These have the same name, but they flip-flop. The radical Republicans were very anti-slave. They were very pro-fixing the problem that had gone in the South. And they were hated by Southerners. They were liked by Northerners. And they didn't even want to welcome the Southern states back to the United States. They thought that they were garbage and they shouldn't. They're not abolitionists like them. But keep in mind, at this point, slavery's over, so abolitionism doesn't exist. But good thing to point up. So people who were previous to the Civil War were for freeing slaves were abolitionists. Now, in a way, yeah, they become kind of the radical. Yeah, I guess what you're saying. I get it now. So they kind of become that group of radical Republicans. You're right. I got it. Yeah, so they don't want anything to do with the South. We are running out of time. And I say that because I have a small child that I have to put to bed at some point. So I'm going to look to end this in about 15 minutes. But we got lots to go through. So I'm going to keep going until someone gives me a really good question. No. Okay. We get 3 amendments out of the Civil War. We get the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendments. They are the Civil Rights Amendments. Don't worry, guys. I have another live YouTube for you guys to go to. I know you don't always like them, but Mr. Hughes is on at 8 o'clock tonight, so you still can study with someone. So the 13th Amendment is formally abolishes slavery, that there is no slavery in the United States. And the 14th Amendment is giving citizenships to African Americans, formerly freed people. And the 15th Amendment gives African American males the right to vote. So those are the Civil Rights Amendments. Key things there to point out: doesn't give everybody the right to vote. It's only giving African American males. Citizenship is granted now to African Americans, formerly enslaved persons, not to Native Americans. Blows my mind. Not until the 1960s, Native American people. Of course you're all going to pass. It's just a matter of how well you're going to pass. Also in that time of Reconstruction, you're getting the Jim Crow laws or the Black Codes. Either one of those terms will work, and that is to kind of create a formalized segregation to really hold the Black man down. So that's when you're seeing kind of the separate busing, the separate water fountains. This lasts from Reconstruction, so 1863, 1865 to 1960. So you're looking at 100 years. You're also looking, you should all remember this, you're looking at another 100 years before African Americans actually start to vote. Why does it take them so long to vote, you may ask? You know, it's the literacy exams, it's the poll tax, it's the grandfather clause. It's those 3 things that'll do that to, and being scared to death of the KKK. But the literacy exam meant that you needed to be able to pass to read and write in order to vote. Formerly enslaved persons don't know how to read and write. Again, most of them don't, right? Then you're looking at the poll tax. That's money you have to spend in order to vote. Where are formerly enslaved people getting that sort of money? They're not. Okay, and then the grandfather clause. that said, if your grandfather didn't vote, then you don't get to vote either. These are all ways of making it so that it's darn near impossible for formerly enslaved persons to vote. And they did these 3 things, in case you're curious, so that uneducated white men could still vote. So, for example, your backwoods Appalachian guy who doesn't know how to read, because it's the 1800s, a lot of people don't know how to read, that guy, his grandfather was able to vote, so he can vote, even though he couldn't read, and maybe he was poor. So see what they're doing? That those black codes are making it impossible for African Americans to vote, even though they've got the constitutional right to vote. Sad. Sad. Very sad. Okay. And in that we get you've done it like your entire life. That's why this all sounds familiar. You've been doing this forever. Plessy versus Ferguson. So Plessy versus Ferguson is when a black man gets on a white train, and he takes it to the Supreme Court because he's kicked off, and the Supreme Court says, "You wrong, Mr. Ferguson. You are not allowed on a white train, and we have a law on separate but equal. So we can have a white train car, you have a black train car. They just have to be, they can be separate, but they have to be equal." And I know, Katie, you're going to say it, but that doesn't work out. Of course it doesn't. It's never separate but equal, and it doesn't work out. So that gets stopped by what Supreme Court case overthrows Plessy versus Ferguson? Did you say it to yourself? Brown versus Board of Education in 1963? I don't know, 1960 something. And that is when they finally, a black young girl takes it to the Supreme Court that, listen, my school's not, it's separate, but it sure ain't equal. I'm certainly not getting the same education as these white kids are getting. So that's, and I love that one for a Regents exam. If you have a Supreme Court question and you have to do a compare and contrast, the smartest thing that you should do is write about Plessy and Ferguson and then compare it to Brown versus Board of Education. And I think you got a shot as your essay. I was pondering this all day today. I think that's going to be one of them. Okay. And I got lots of videos on that too. So keep watching if you want to study more on Supreme Court. I pretty much have the whole lesson we did in class on my YouTube video. So watch them. That's a good one. If it's not an essay, it's like 5 multiple choice questions. So see, Katie got it all. You're so smart. Okay. Everyone's getting these questions right. You guys are brilliant. All right. Industrialization. So industrialization is powered particularly by steam. So I had nothing to do with this. The United States of America really starts to use its steam power. That makes transportation way easy. And this, so again, things obviously overlap. So we're looking again at like the 1800s, even though we've gone through the Civil War. So steam existed before we had trains and such for the Civil War. But this is just a new topic we're going to look at. So with that, again, Erie Canal, Transcontinental Railroad. You probably sang a song in 5th grade about the Erie Canal. We do get kind of a gap between the rich and the poor because of industrialization, especially when you start to get things like Andrew Carnegie and his steel, J.P. Morgan and his oil, all Rockefeller and his oil. Yes, Katie, Plessy and Ferguson and Brown versus Board of Education are kind of the same thing, but exactly different. So they're the same situation, but different scenarios and different time frames. Erie Canal. Erie Canal goes from Lake Erie, the Great Lake in Western New York, and they build a man-made river all the way out to the Hudson River over by us. And that means that now goods that are made in anywhere in the Midwest can get from any of the Great Lakes all the way out to the Hudson River, and then ultimately down to New York City and the Atlantic Ocean. That's what's important about the Erie Canal. And you probably, you learned about the whole locking, a boat's got to come through the water. That part's not, it's very fun, but you don't need to go too much. The big thing, again, you might see that as like 1 through 5, maybe on the Regents. A question on geographers that the now really help mobilize the state of New York, kind of a question. It's not going to be a big thing. You're not going to, you might have it for a question as far as a geography question, but you're not writing an independent essay on the Erie Canal. All right. On my paper, I'm seeing tariffs. That's a good vote. Tariffs are tax on foreign goods. So you've got item made in the United States. You got an item made in China. You can tax the item made in China so that people start to buy American. Social Darwinism. Think of science class. What's Darwinism? You studied that, right? Only the young survive. The survival of the fittest. Social Darwinism, same concept, is done for business. So I run a business, make spray. Clearly it does, but I make a business selling, making bug spray. And it's really bad, and it doesn't work. It fails. My business fails. Well, Social Darwinism says that fine. That means you're a really cruddy, and it should fail. That's it. That's the concept. The strong businesses are going to survive. I made a good business, and my bug spray would work. I think this is scary bug spray, by the way. All right, laissez-faire, capitalism. Oh, I think it should get better. My audio, it was really windy there for a second. I think you're going to be okay. Laissez-faire capitalism is hands-off. Goes along with social Darwinism. That means that if it's going to fail, a company's going to fail. Laissez-faire. Off. It's French for hands off, or at least I think it's French for hands off. That's what I've always been told. So where a bug spray business is failing, social Darwinism, kid, like hands off, laissez-faire economics. It's just gonna fail. I think we're coming through again. I don't know. Maybe I'm not. Remember, we're a capitalist society, so we make money by what people want to buy, what people want to sell, what people want to do. So we decide what is sold. Fidget spinners, they're only sold because people want to buy them. And that's a perfect example of capitalism. You weren't buying them because someone told you had to. You bought them because for whatever reason you thought cool. And they made this really big thing of it. That's capitalism. It's capitalism. Okay. Gilded age. That's when everything looks pretty. Something's gilded. It means it's got gold outside, but it could be a piece of crap on the inside. I just said the C word. Woo-hoo. Okay. And so there's a whole period of time things look really good in America. Things weren't going well. And this is also the time when we talk about robber barons. So the idea of kind of stealing from the rich. Or stealing from the poor, giving to the rich. So as the rich get richer, the poor. Remember when we Monopoly? Yeah, that was really fun. That's the Gilded Age. So everything's great, but it's not going so well. Let's see. Out of time. Couple things that come out of Gilded Age as far as books go. You might see them. How the Other Half Lives by Jacob Riis. Talking about that, he does a story about how the poor, what the living conditions look like for the poor. Upton St. Clair writes The Jungle, which is about the meatpacking industry, and how really gross and disturbing it was, like human fingers and blood and gross, like dead body meat. It was really disgusting. So that's that one. What else I want to talk about? That'll do. Immigration. Hope you guys are feeling confident on that one. Couple keywords on that. Chinese Exclusion Act. Ida Turnbull is also the poor. Poor particularly women and children and the poor. Yes, same basic story as Jacob Riis. And that's that. So Chinese Exclusion Act, very racist plan, was that, you know, Chinese people weren't allowed to come into the United States. That's that one. Nativism, I know you guys know that one because you guys said it today. That's that foreigners weren't allowed into the United States. People just didn't like that idea. I got interstate commerce. That's when the United States finally makes a plan to work with states to work on getting like stuff that's made in one state to another state, really like vamping up and working to, like, that's how we end up getting, like, my entire dinner tonight was probably from California. Like, that's how that happened. Like, the interstate commerce system made it cheaper for that to occur, so that my food grown in California able to be shipped and trucked to me cheaply and quickly, because the U.S. government funds that. The government gives them money that. Missing what's going on. She got companies doing gradients or something like. I don't think so, but maybe take a look. You've got the internet in front of you right now. Look her up. Look up data for a good second there. But that doesn't sound right to me. All right. Although actually I could be Ida Turnbull mixed up with Jane Addams, who definitely worked with the poor. She got dressed up and pretended she was rich or poor or something. Newspaper. She was kind of cool. So that's the progressive era. Okay. That is just about where I'm going to end for today. Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head, Malcolm. That's why you have to look it up, because I don't know everything. This was a lot of information. All right, so we're coming to the end here. Couple of key things. First of all, go to Mr. Hughes's website. He's the guy that you don't all like. He's fantastic. He's amazing. Okay? Go on right now, hearing a live review. It's probably better than mine. I will tell you, he's so many subscribers, he will not probably be looking at your particular questions, but go on and watch him. He's going to be amazing. You're going to get some of the same things I've talked about, but I think he's done this for like 1,000 years. So he's got tons of information for you. Well, okay, so investigative journalism. What did she investigate? We still don't know. So we got that far. We knew that. We knew she was an author. And muckrakers are any of the people that are taking the muck out of the American society. That's where that term's coming from. Those are all the people talk about. All right. Well, you could keep going. What that she found? I don't have her in my notes, I don't think. Oh, yeah. Example muckrakers. Right there. If The Jungle by Upton St. Ida Turnbull, Lincoln Stevens, and Jacob Riis. Great. Even if don't have her. She's not that important. We just need she is. Is his website on YouTube? Hughes History. Oh, what else? I think who that was. So yeah, history. Just look him. Hughes is his name. Great guy. He's from New York, talking Regent stuff all along. He's fantastic. If you have questions, particularly if you happen to be at school early, you can come see me earlier. You can be studying all morning if you don't know what to. What is him? Keith. He is his first name. His YouTube name is Hip Hughes. Do you want me to post it? Would that be easier? I can do that, I think. You just get me a Hip Hughes. Let's see. I think I can even get you the exact. I might make noise here in a second. because it might come up with he's probably on right now. He's live right this second. I'm going to post it. I'm going to copy and paste it for you. And here, oh no, where did I lose it? And there you go. There's his live review right now. All right. So watch him. Also, get some sleep tonight. That's very important. Have a nice breakfast tomorrow. Don't be sleepy. It's going to be hot. Whether you're my student or not my student, it's going to be hot wherever you are. It's a hot day tomorrow. So unless you have air conditioning in your school, where the rest of us are jealous, it's going to be hot. So, dress appropriately. Dress something comfortable so that you're not uncomfortable all day. And that should be that. Just keep studying. Go on to my website. Does everyone still have that? Do you want that up there? I can give you that one too. Hold on. I'll put that one up. I'll link that one. Just so you guys know, Mr. Hughes has 672 viewers right now. That's how good this man is. He's amazing. All right. And I think you guys should always have to watch me instead of actually have me because you're way quieter. Regents review. So go on to my website, check out all of my stuff, read through everything, understand. Oh no, I lost my chat. Oh no. I did. I lost my chat, so I can't get to you. I don't think this chat will work. Yeah, I lost my chat. But you guys know my address. So check that out. And I will see you all tomorrow. All right. Oh, there it is. Hold on. I can. Oh, hey, hold on. Okay, I'm back. What's the username? Okay, there we go. There it is. There's the brain pop. Okay, brain pop. Brain pop. And then the password is love it. And then password lion. So username love it, password lion, and that's just brainpop.com or whatever it is. All right, so there's the things, my website, brain pop information, and I will see you guys bright and early tomorrow. Thanks for staying on, and best of luck tomorrow. All right, bye guys.